Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. This is a strange video entitled "It's Been a Funny Old Year." And it has. I thought I'd look back over the year. And obviously it goes back to the start of the year, which is the depths of winter. But the good thing about that period is the resting dendrobiums are doing their thing. They're building up to coming into bloom, providing they get, suitable treatment. And that last winter was the best winter I've had for those types of orchids. At that time, quite a few of the plants came out into the house, and I effectively bought in some shelving from out here, put the plants that were on that shelving somewhere else, and then brought in some plants that I thought would not appreciate the cold winter temperatures. That was the Phalaenopsis, the Psychopsis, and my Paphiopedilums. And quite honestly, none of them did that well. In effect, one of the Psychopsis spike died. The Phalaenopsis did okay, I suppose, and quite a few of them actually bloomed in the winter in the house. But the Psychopsis didn't like it. The Paphiopedilums seemed okay until a couple of them bloomed, and then the blooms only lasted a very, very short period. And I just put it down to my inability to be able to keep the air moist. Obviously it was a very cold winter last year. The heating was on a lot of the time, sometimes all day, and that drops the humidity down to desert type air and that's just not suitable for orchids. So this year nothing's coming in the house, it's all staying out here, and it's a gamble, but I think that the drop in humidity and that dramatic change for the plants, followed by another dramatic change to the plants, bringing them back out here, did them more harm than good. So the theory this year is the only thing they're going to get that they don't like is the cooler night temperatures, and they'll have to put up with it. It's a case of like it or lump it or do the other thing. The hedge is waiting. But I think I did more harm than good with those plants last year, so I'm not doing it this year. So everything stays out here this year, this winter, which is, I think winter officially started today. You can tick that date on the calendar. Winter starts now. Of course it does. Yes, I am joking. It starts when it's good and ready. What else happened early in the year? Early in the year we had the big box, which has been referred to many times, and there is a video of the big box being opened and all the plants being taken out. Now some were DOA, that was actually posted in what was endearingly known as the Beast from the East, one of the coldest periods we've had in this country for a very long time, and posting orchids in that weather was not the best of ideas. But I was amazed how many survived, quite honestly. But some of them didn't, and some of them have gone down since. There was a nice little I've forgotten what it was now, but there were some losses in amongst those plants. But for me, that was quite a massive influx of new plants. Now, there were some very interesting dendrobiums in there. Most of those have been mounted, but not all of them. Some are in pots. And yeah, there's some interesting stuff in there. And a few other plants as well. But apart from that massive influx, I haven't bought many orchids this year. Hibiki was bought early this year, and that's been a star performer. And I think it will continue to be so. Although the blooms have gone now, as with many plants, as soon as the blooms are over, it starts chucking out new growths. I've got two buried in there, one out to the right, another one in the centre, and this large one that got ahead of the others, basically. So yeah, I've got 2, 4, 5 new growths on that. And there's still some of the existing canes that haven't actually bloomed, so they will next year. Whether the new growths will be blooming size by next year, or I don't know, but I haven't had the plant long enough to see its growth pattern Yeah, but that was a lovely addition. I think the Oncidium Soto Annan, which is a recent acquisition, I think that's the only Oncidium type I bought this year. So that's the only new one in that little arena, and quite a few of the others are not doing well. This is not my best genus, and it flipping well should be. But I did have quite a few plants that got some bacterial rot on them, and the pseudobulbs just melted basically and were full of really foul smelling liquid when I sort of took them apart. And I managed to save an odd bulb or two, most of which are down here now. These are now in a state of rescue. I mean, they are all growing some new growths, but whether they'll all actually make it or not, I don't know. Recovering from that sort of disaster is not easy, but some are still growing. I mean, even my Nellie Isla's got a new growth. I'd have to class that as a success, because I think I've lost 4 of those in the past. I've managed to keep some Zygopetalums alive. I mean, this has got 2 nice new growths coming on it. It's had 2 previous nice new growths, but they didn't bloom, they didn't spike, so maybe these will. Another one up the back here, pushing up some nice new growths. That one's not doing very well, but it has got a new growth, so I've kept some zygos alive. First time. Quite a few new acquisitions in the Cattleya Alliance, because I lost a lot going back over several years. But the person I was buying them from, their whole collection was infected with Fusarium, and I didn't know what that was at the time, so I wasn't treating it. I was just humbly accepting the fact that I didn't look after them well enough, so they died. I know better now. Knowledge is a good thing when it helps you keep stuff alive. But yeah, so quite a few replacements in the Cattleya Alliance, and most of those were helped by viewers volunteering to actually go to a nursery and hand pick the plants and then post them on to me at the proper cost of the postage, because there's an awful lot of nurseries don't have to rip you off with the postage, but then I suppose they've got to pay somebody to pack them up and everything. But nonetheless, to have hand picked orchids from a nursery is good, because when a nursery is open to the public and sells online, you have to sort of look at the way their mindset would work. If they're open to the public and they've got 2 plants of the same type, and one's really good and one's not so good, and somebody buys one online, which one are they going to send online? Are they going to send their best looking plant when they're open to the public? Probably not. So having them handpicked was a real help. It was, it got them off to a reasonable start. So yeah, it's been quite. And some of those are, they'll all be first-time bloomers, but 3 have done that. I mean, the little miniature Cattleya up there, that's bloomed, so that's reached blooming size. It was apparently sold as blooming size. That came out of the big box. All 3 of those little Cattleyas did, in fact, and they're all growing. They're all doing okay, despite their distinct chill they had on their journey. This is a recent acquisition. That's reached blooming size. This straggly looking thing up here, it's good new growth, did actually bloom a while back. So out of the new acquisitions, we've had some blooms. That's good. My Dendrobium Phalaenopsis types were going downhill over a period of 2 years. Difficult to understand why, because this year they've decided to grow. I mean, I did have some Dendrobium Phalaenopsis blooms back in the winter, but I mean, it's the 3 along the back there. And I mean, I've got good new growths on this year. They've come on well. So that's a success, from a failure to a success. That's not bad. So there have been some losses. There's been some new acquisitions, but the main thing that took place was the 4,000 subscribers giveaway. Now, everybody was grateful for their plants, but in actual fact I had an ulterior motive. My mouth won't work, more coffee. And the idea was thought up by my daughter. as she was down for the weekend and I was complaining that the plants were cluttered, too squashed together, not getting enough air around them, and she said, well, why don't you get rid of some? And I said, well, there's some, you know, they're not all lousy plants, you know, there's some good plants in here, but there's some in here I just don't particularly like the blooms that much or whatever. And she said, well, why don't you do a giveaway? So it was her idea. And 4,000 subscribers is not normally one of those milestones where you do a big deal. But by doing it, I managed to shift a lot of plants. And that gave me some space. And my buying regime now is geared up to prerequisites. And I'm quite strict. Yeah. The fragrance is a bonus. I don't class that as an essential. But what I do like is strong, healthy plants with good root systems to start with. And then all you've got to do is keep them like that, as opposed to buying a plant with a lousy root system that immediately becomes a rescue, or one that's in broken down media and has totally lost its roots. You know, you're going to struggle with those. So, and the other prerequisite is that I like the blooms, and preferably they last quite a good amount of time. You know, it's all very well having an impressive bloom, but if it only lasts a few days and only blooms once a year, that's a plant that's sitting there just doing green for the rest of the year. Some people may like all that, but I grow them for the blooms and in some cases the interesting plant. Yeah, I mean, it's like this. I'd have this Dendrobium even if it didn't bloom, because it's just interesting. It's just an unusual thing to look at. As it happens, this one grows really well. And that was one of the successes of last winter's rest, because that bloomed well this spring, as did the giant bush next to it. That's Friedrichianum and Findlayanum, those two. And they've both grown on well this year, and I'm expecting good things from them after this winter rest. What else have we got? The Vandas, they had a bad deal. The spikes that were produced back in the heat wave faded fast. But the spikes that are out now are going to last well. I mean, you know, that is a hell of a Vanda spike. So, you know, and that one looked like it was going to die back in the winter. It got some very strange markings on the leaves, and did videos about it and asked what people thought, and lots of ideas came in. And it's one of those sort of things where a lot of the ideas were good and probably right. But there was no one thing that you could put your finger on and say that's what went wrong. But it's recovered, it's grown new leaves. Some of the marks on the leaves have stayed there, some have disappeared. So whatever it was, it's got over it. And yet this little Vanda that's always done really well for me, that didn't like the heat. It's got a lot of marks on those leaves, and it's probably dropped over 6 leaves at the base, so it's now got one of those horrible stalk things. But it has got a kiki, so it has got a young plant. I'm hoping that will grow up and disguise that stumpy stalk thing that they often get that way. You know, they drop their older leaves. New things. Oh, I got some Draculas for the first time, so they're new to me. And 2 of the 3, one was given to me, and it's actually a Dracula Masdevallia cross. But the 2 pure Draculas I've got have both got spikes on, so and they're both looking quite nice plants. So that's a new thing for me. I managed to keep my Miltoniopsis alive through the heat wave. They're growing on nicely. We should see some blooms on those in the not too distant future. My Cymbidium survived being outside in the heat wave. I'm sure it didn't like it, but it survived. Older leaves are going on the older ones, but a good set of leaves on the latest growth. And we've got spikes, or spike definitely, and possibly one round the other side. That bloomed in the winter last year. Looks like it's going to do it again. So yeah, coming on. A very sad potential loss is sitting over here in the glass. Now this is, I won't say was yet, because I'm still living in hope, but this was my Dendrobium Harvey Annan. which was a real star performer on 2 consecutive years, and it just went down, and I still don't know why. Luckily, I managed to get, let's just put that down a minute, 2 good kikis off of it, which is this little pot here, and both have pushed up nice new growths. Yeah, so that's 2 kikis, so the plant is saved as a species in the grow room. But unfortunately the mother plant I really don't think is going to make it. But it's not dead yet. I mean, it's now pushing out another kiki, which has already got some roots. Now if that's all it ever does now and doesn't produce anything from the... Oh, there's another one halfway down that... well, near the base of that cane. So there's still life in it, but it will not grow from the base. And there's no sign of any new roots. So I don't know whether that mother plant's actually going to ever make it or not. But as long as it produces kikis, I've got something to pot up to grow on again as a new plant. But yeah, that's quite a sad loss if that does go over, because that always did well for me, that one. Virtually constantly in bloom, that. I'll do a pop-up. Well worth having. I lost quite a few of my Phalaenopsis. 2 of them went down in the winter indoors, and one of them just had a lovely root system, absolutely stunning root system, a real good pot full. And a couple of days later I looked and they'd all gone brown and soggy. Again, some sort of bacterial rot, so that had to just go straight away. The whole plant just out. I wasn't even going to attempt to rescue that. And another large one did the same thing not long after it, so 2 of the large Phalaenopsis went. I don't worry too much about the hybrid Phalaenopsis, because I know a place where I can go and pay a few pounds for a good plant in bloom. So, you know, if I wanted to replace them, which at the moment I don't, I could, so I don't worry about that. I managed to get Deces following a repot to grow and bloom and stay alive through the heat wave, and there's lots of new plants in these pots. There's one still in bloom, so those have made it. I'm surprised. That sort of heat is not good for them. My little pinguiculas, I know they're not orchids, but they've bloomed all through the year, and they've put on some nice growth. They're nice looking plants, and always a little splash of pretty little blooms. They just seem to do okay in here. That's the Mexican pinguiculas, so in theory they should keep their green all through the winter, providing they don't get too cold. My Tolumnias, again, another success tinged with failure. At one point I had 15, I've now got 7, so half didn't make it, and that was a major scale attack at the time when I wasn't using a suitable treatment, and so it perpetuated over a long period of time, and I kept battling with them and not winning. And in the end I decided, right, you're going to get some serious systemic treatment, and I literally unmounted virtually everything, decided what wasn't going to make it and threw them away. Again, there's a video of that kitchen session, a bit sad that one. You could have drawn a line down the middle and said, right, you lot under the hedge, you lot get cleaned up, remounted with some fresh moss, and see if you can recover yourselves. And in the main they have. I did notice yesterday when I was watering, I'm not going to get it down, but one of them has got a new spike just starting, and it is my all-time favourite Tolumnia, which is Tolumnia Peach, and it has a spike. I mean, this one's still in bloom, and this one's just going. So, you know, they've recovered enough to be able to bloom, so I'm pleased with those. My large specimen-sized Dendrobium nobile types, the Prima Donna and the Spring Dreamer pollen, they got beyond their suitable size. And it's a difficult thing to explain, but they just got too big for their boots, and certainly Prima Donna, I mean, that got a Best in Show award. Well, it certainly wouldn't get it now, but it had got so big that I decided to split it. So more than half, the larger piece went to somebody else, and the new piece is growing on well. and should bloom again in the spring. It won't be as spectacular, but it may well be the following year. And the Spring Dreamer pollen, the big one got given away, and I've got two smaller ones sort of coming on in the background, growing on. There'll be a while before they get to blooming size again. One was a pot of kikis and the other one was a small piece that split off. Still got some non-bloomers in here, living with them at the moment. But they're on borrowed time. Seriously, I'm getting quite ruthless now. If you won't bloom and I can't work out why, then let somebody else have a go. That's my theory. But I'm pleased with the Dendrobium growth this year. My anosmum's put on a lovely cane. That's hanging down here. So that's probably a good 3 foot long. Only one, but I'll live with that. It was a recent acquisition. It did the year before, and it did bloom. Late winter, early spring, and now it's got another strong new cane, hopefully to do the same thing again. So yeah, it's been a funny old year, but getting the plants through that heat wave was hard work, very hard work, and I'd class that as a struggle. Each day was becoming a chore, because every single day the mounts needed watering, the Vanders and other assorted things needed dunking in the bucket. The watering of the pots was coming round frequently. It was hard work. And on top of that, I was trying to keep things alive in the garden as well. You know, my bonsai trees, and I've got some other things in tubs. And the whole garden was having to be watered with the hose. Even my wild strawberries were drying up and dying. So, you know, it was a hard summer. But it ended, and the sensible weather came back, and now we're heading into another winter, and this winter will be different yet again. Always something changing, and this year the difference is the lights, and I'm hoping to see a marked effect. I mean, the first one arrived as a collaboration with the manufacturer. They basically said, we'll send you a light free if you do a video review on the light, what you think of it, and show how you're going to use it, and then perhaps do a review at the end of the winter after its use. I agreed to that, so they sent me one, and I liked it so much I bought another one, and they sent the second one and put these two little ones in free. So I've got a very good relationship with these people. They're a new company. This whole thing is new technology, so obviously they want to promote it. And hopefully soon, both Rachel and Oliver, so that's Gardening at Douentza and Oliver's Greenhouse, who also were given one, are going to get round to showing theirs and what they're going to do with theirs for the winter. I've got a feeling I know what Rachel's going to do. I haven't got a clue what Oliver's going to do. But that's what I've done with mine, and I'm using them to... I mean, in theory, they should be on now, because this is a very dull day. The light level is quite low today. You can see the sky is real heavy grey out there, and it's been raining on and off. So it is a dull day. But the idea was to extend the day length, which at this time of year is fine. That's all. I'm happy with doing just that. And I've got a water today, so I don't want these lights blinding me every time I look up. So they're certainly not going on while I'm doing that. But yeah, just a sort of summary of the year. I mean, some of my larger Oncidium types have bloomed their heads off. You remember the Shelob Tolkien? That did well. Peter Comp's been in bloom on and off and is still in bloom now. What else? The Miltonia Sunset, that's been in bloom on and off all through the year. So yeah, we've had some good stuff. The Epidendrum up the back there, that's pushing its new growth out now, taller than the previous canes, or up to the same height. So they'll slow down a bit in the winter, but then they should start spiking as the spring arrives, and that one will be in bloom through most of the summer again. And yeah, so a funny old year. Some new acquisitions, some plants given away, and some lost. You know, it seems to be the nature of the beast. You can't win them all. but winning most of them is the goal. We all lose a plant. I mean, these two were a success. These are Miltonias. They both, I bought 3 from a place in Madeira, nursery in Madeira, and all 3 of them were really seriously infected with Fusarium. One of them died quite quickly, and the other 2 responded to the treatment and grew on, and both bloomed. And I mean, this one now, I mean, that fat bulb in the middle of the shot was its first new growth after its Fusarium treatment, and I was pleased. The leaves didn't look bad, and it was a nice large bulb, yeah? But then it produced 2 new growths, one out each side. And now if you look, both of those new growths are pushing out 2 new growths. There's only a little one down on there, but so that's gone from 1 new growth to 2 to 4. That's progression. And if all 4 of these latest new growths bloom, that's going to be quite a show next year. Just a matter of growing it on now. And the other one responded to treatment yet again. That produced a single new bulb. And that was its first sign of recovery. And it wasn't a good sign, but it managed it. Then it pushed out 2 new growths, one of which bloomed. Yeah, and shortly those 2 new growths will be pushing out their new growth. So I've had some success with treating Fusarium, but I will say straight away, if you've got Fusarium in a monopodial type orchid like a Phalaenopsis or a Vanda or that type of plant, you're going to be lucky to get rid of it because it's in the rhizome, and the rhizome is the plant. And so it will depend how far up that stalk it's got. I mean, with a Phalaenopsis, cutting away the old part of the plant would help, but that'll probably leave you with no roots. So it's a difficult one. Treating it, if you can kill it off, that's great. But the damage is already done, so all the pathways that your nutrients and your hydration need to get up through the plant to the leaves is bunged up. So trying to recover those is not easy. But if it's the type of orchid like this that grows quite vigorously with new bulbs, the new parts grow clean. And even though the old part's still got Fusarium in it and it's bunged up, if it's dead and it stops spreading, the new bits will be good. Because they'll form their own root system and they're separate effectively from the old part of the plant. But you've got to make sure you really have repeated the treatment recommended and kill the flipping stuff off, because it'll come back otherwise. You've got to do the job properly, otherwise it'll just creep back into the new growths. So yeah, so that's just a sort of general summary of the year. And it hasn't been a bad one. We've had some good blooms, but I mean, obviously my main period of blooming is late winter, early spring. That's when I've got the most things in bloom. There's quite a few of the Cattleyas will be out around that time. You know, they're late winter bloomers, quite a few of them. So there's those to come. And obviously most of the Dendrobiums are late winter, early spring bloomers. And there's a lot of them, so we've got that to come. But this time of year is a bit of a quiet time. The odd Cattleya popping its head up, gracing us with its presence. So there's a few early winter bloomers in amongst them. The Latoria Dendrobiums, they can bloom when they flipping like, quite honestly, and they last so long, they're always a bonus. I mean, I've got this one out at the moment, which is Nora Tokunaga crossed with Aberrans, and this one's out at the moment. That's another cross with, oh, that's a primary cross, that's Polysema crossed with Aberrans, but Aberrans is in there again. Gets about, that one. It's obviously very useful for hybridization, and I think why it's used is it dwarfs the plants down. The actual Aberrans Latoria is quite a small plant, nice compact little plant, and obviously that would pass on those genes into a hybrid. So where you might have a really large Latoria, crossing it with Aberrans will bring it down in size, but it does bring the blooms down in size as well, because the pure Aberrans blooms are quite small. My little Rhodostictum, that's going to bloom soon, another Latoria type. Not that happy a plant, but happy enough to produce a nice new growth, bigger than the previous ones, and a bloom spike. So coming on. It's not growing as best as some of the other Latoria types, but it's hanging in there. My Hercoglossum has got a massive set of new growths up the top. It's still got some leaved canes down here. Those will be next spring's blooms, along with some of those and some of the older canes that have lost their leaves. It looks like it may even be starting early down here. Not sure. Might be Kikis. But again, I took some Kikis off of that, and up on the end of the shelf there is 2 potfuls of growing Kikis. They're coming on nicely. So I've perpetuated that plant. So there's 2 starter plants for somebody else now. But I'm certainly not posting anything this time of year. But come the decent weather again in the spring, I have got some plants to go. I don't normally ask money for my plants. What I ask for is the postage to be paid for. I don't grow my plants to make money out of them. As far as I'm concerned, my return for growing my plants and videoing them is the money I get back from YouTube. I don't expect to get money from viewers. You know, you do your bit by watching the ads. But only watch the short ones. I've heard recently there was one over an hour long. Now don't be silly. It's nice to have your support, but I still say that an ad that's, I'd say 30 seconds is long enough. You're a kind person if you're prepared to watch a minute, but I quite honestly, if the ads are too long, they shouldn't be watched. Just skip out of them and don't worry about it. I mean, I do if I'm watching other people's videos. If I see an ad that's longer than my patience, then skip it gets. Anyway, just a general summary of things going on, things that have done well, things pulling through, and some have ceased to be, as is the way. I'm reasonably confident that an amount of my Paphiopedilums are going to bloom this winter. I've got some good roots on some of those this year. It's just a matter of remembering to repot them frequently and not let them get in stale media. There's quite a few plants some plants will put up with old media for quite a long time, and others just won't have it. They just go down. They lose their roots. They won't have a stale acidic media. They just dump their roots. And if you catch them in time, you might rescue them, but if you don't, you've probably lost the plant. So, you know, keep your eye on your repot dates. Make sure you've either got them written on your tag or some notes, and you know, what I do with my notes is every now and again I go through and I have a look at the last repot date. Yeah. Now I use colours in my spreadsheet, so if the repot date is in browny orange, it means it's a mount. If it's in a greeny colour, it means it's in a pot, basically. So I know the difference. So when I'm updating my notes because I've watered things, I've just got to look at the colour. But what I do is if I see a pot that ought to be repotted, I just change the colour to red. And it shouts at me every time I look at my notes, and eventually I will get around to repotting those plants. And I have got some. There are some red ones in there that need looking into, but they're going to wait. They're going to wait for the start of the better weather, basically. Repotting this time of year is an extra bit of stress on the grounds. They won't be growing as well through the winter months, so it's not worth the risk. And they're not in media that's so far gone that I'm going to lose a root system. I don't let them get that far anymore. I used to, and lost a lot of plants as a consequence. So learn your lessons, as they say. Okay, that'll do for today. As I say, there's no new blooms opened. My everything in bloom on the 8th will still have a few. Not many, but there will at least be some. And then it's going to get a bit quiet until the Cattleyas start going again. And possibly the Phalaenopsis type Dendrobiums should push out some spikes. The growths certainly are big enough and strong enough, and they've now got decent root systems under them, so they should spike. But again, they're not showing signs of those spikes yet, and they do take a while from the first time you see them to actually blooms opening, so they're probably going to be late winter, early spring. So yeah, so that's it, a summary of the year. Some good, some bad, some indifferent, some serious interference with heat waves, making life difficult, and preceded by one of the coldest springs we've had for a very, very long time. As I said, endearingly known as the beast from the east. And, and then it went away for a while and it came back again. So we had the return of the beast from the east. The sequel. But yeah, so we've had some interference with extreme prejudice from the weather this year. But most things have come through it. You know, it's not all dead, not all doom and gloom. So I'm quite pleased with my year this year. And the idea is that each year is at least the same or preferably better. Yeah? And if that's happening, you're doing okay. If each year is getting worse, then, you know, perhaps some work or effort needs to be done to find out why. You know, because having an orchid that's not suited to its environment, it will struggle. But that doesn't mean to say it should die. It's just not going to grow perhaps as well as somebody else's might in a more suited environment. But you know, they're pretty adaptable things, these orchids. They will put up with bordering on abuse in some cases and still hang in there. They want to live. Yeah. Although I have had a few that seem just determined to die one way or the other, and whatever I did, they won and I lost. It happens. So yeah, so a different winter this year, and we'll see what we come out the other end with. Proof of the pudding, as they say. So hopefully in the spring we'll get masses of winter resting Dendrobiums, the rest of the Cattleyas, and some other things, and we'll see how we go. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.